Pennhurst State School, a live-in facility for people with mental and physical disabilities, was surrounded by controversy from its earliest days. In 1908, the state of Pennsylvania built the school as an asylum for patients with special needs. This complex, first known as the State Institution for Epileptics and Feeble-Minded, was filled with adults and children with varying disabilities. From its very beginning, the school's history of mistreatment and abuse was quietly underway. Over 10,000 patients crossed through the doors into Pennhurst, residing in one of the many buildings in the school's network. Overwhelmed parents dropped off their children who were mentally retarded or autistic, hoping the school would provide for them. Sadly, many of these children were abandoned to become wards of the state. While some patients could care for themselves, many more suffered from severe disabilities. Those patients who couldn't care for themselves became the school's most vulnerable victims. Despite the high number of patients requiring special care, the state provided the institution with meager funds. There were very few doctors, nurses, and orderlies available to meet the patients' needs. Many patients spent their days and nights trapped in metal cribs in horrid conditions. Others were so desperate for human contact that they went to great lengths for attention by injuring themselves or even smearing themselves with their own feces in hopes of a bath. Cruel punishments were common there. An overworked staff responded to unruly patients by drugging them into submission or chaining them to their beds. Other residents were isolated for such long periods of time that they regressed and lost their will to speak, fight, or even to live. One particularly harsh rule chastised patients for biting. When a patient bit someone for the first time, he or she was scolded. But if it happened again, the patient was sent to a dentist who would pull all of his teeth. Thousands of teeth were removed in a rusty dentist chair that still sits in the tunnels beneath Pennhurst Complex. Not all of the residents were abandoned by their family members. When loved ones came to visit, they were appalled to find their children bruised and uncared for. Even in 1912, there were reports of the poor quality of treatment, but it was quickly apparent that outsiders could do little to help, and patients continued to suffer from abuse, rape, even deaths at the hands of staff and other patients. Society continued to turn a blind eye to the horrors of this state-run institution. Changes started brewing at Pennhurst in 1968 when Philadelphia television news reporter Bill Baldini produced an expose on the institution. Suffer the Little Children uncovered the atrocities and created a sympathetic public. This exposure led to a massive lawsuit, and in 1977, Pennhurst patients achieved a small victory when the school was found guilty of violating patients' constitutional rights. While this decision couldn't undo the past, it certainly made progress for the future. The facility closed its doors in 1987, and the network of buildings was neglected and left to the tortured, sad spirits. Today, caretakers of the property believe that the buildings and underground tunnels are haunted by the angry spirits of patients who suffered and died here. There are reports of slamming doors, footsteps, and sounds of vomiting coming from otherwise empty rooms. Some witnesses have seen the spirit of a little girl roaming the buildings, perhaps waiting to tell her own story of sorrow and neglect. The Pennhurst State School and Asylum was authorized for construction in 1903. It was conceived as a state-funded and operated facility to house any individual deemed feeble-minded and thus unable to function in normal society. This included physically and mentally disabled persons. individuals with abnormalities, physical or psychological, and mute, deaf, and blind people. It also included those with offensive habits and imperfect speech, and when admitted, patients were classified physically as either imbecile or insane, classified mentally as healthy or epileptic, and classified dentally as having teeth either good, poor, or treated. And as time went on, the institution would be pressured to also house and hold immigrants, criminals, and orphans. It became the solution for ridding society of all undesirables. In fact, the institution's campus functioned as a self-contained city, with residents completing all the tasks necessary to run their small society. It was a collective fear of the other that created the need for a place like Pennhurst. In 1913, legislature created a commission for the care of the feeble-minded, which declared that disabled individuals were both unfit for citizenship and a menace to the peace. It called for such people to be taken into custodial care by the government, and this served to keep disabled people away from the general population for everyone's safety, as well as to keep them from reproducing. Even more disturbing than the fact that such a facility existed is that it existed for so long. By the 1960s, Pennhurst was home to about 2,791 people, almost 900 more than maximum capacity. Of course, today the asylum is shrouded in ghost tales and reports of paranormal activity, and as 2010, one building was partially reopened as the Pennhurst Asylum Haunted House. Some visitors claim to hear voices, shrieks, and murmurs of pains from former residents and inmates of the facility. The hauntings are terrifying for multiple reasons. Aside from the typical fear of the paranormal, the ghosts of Pennhurst serve as a collective reminder of just how cruel society can be towards its own members. Numerous shadows manifest and dissipate at will. These shadows include what appeared to be a small female child with long black hair, a hunched-over presence with long dangling arms, and the upper portion of bodies looking over or around obstacles. Doors and rocking chairs have moved without anyone being near them. Investigators have been shoved from behind, pushed downstairs, and scratched. Objects being propelled in the basement, such as a pry bar, some sort of brass fixture, and various other unknown objects. Multiple EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, as well as EMF spikes throughout the building when there is no electric supplied to any building there. Pennhurst at night will scare you half to death. When the wind blows across the buildings, it sounds like someone walking. But is it the wind? There were dead animals there, and would look like blood on some of the equipment. Once is enough. You'll never go back.